August 25, 1944. Paris, France, the most beautiful city in the world, is wired with explosives. The Eiffel Tower, Notre Dame Cathedral, the Louvre Museum, every bridge across the Seine, all rigged to blow. Adolf Hitler has given a direct order. Paris must not fall into enemy hands except as a field of ruins. In his underground bunker in East Prussia, the Führer is screaming into telephone. Is Paris burning? Is Paris burning? And in his headquarters at the Hotel Morris, one German general holds the detonator. General Dietrich von Choltitz, military governor of Paris, a loyal Nazi officer who has destroyed cities before. He has his orders. He has the explosives. He has the power to erase 1,000 years of Western civilization in a single afternoon. But he doesn't push the button tonight. I'm going to tell you the story of the Nazi general who supposedly defied Hitler to save Paris. A story of moral courage, or calculated survival. A tale of heroism, or clever myth-making, because here's the truth. 70 years later, historians still argue about what really happened in those final days of occupied Paris. Did one German general save the City of Light? Or did he simply take credit for what French resistance fighters had already accomplished? If you're fascinated by the moral complexity of World War II, by the fine line between heroes and villains, by stories where the truth is more complicated than the legend, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Let's go back to 1940 and meet the man who would one day hold Paris's fate in his hands. Dietrich von Choltitz was born on November 9, 1894, in Wies, Germany, a small town in Silesia. He came from a military family. Prussian military tradition ran in his blood. At age 18, he joined the Saxon army as a cadet. World War I was raging. Young Choltitz saw combat on the Western Front. He was wounded twice, decorated for bravery. By war's end, he was a lieutenant with a chest full of medals. After Germany's defeat in 1918, Choltitz stayed in the military, the small, restricted army that the Treaty of Versailles permitted. He was a professional soldier, a man who followed orders, a man who believed in duty above all else. When the Nazis came to power in 1933, Choltitz wasn't particularly political. He wasn't an ideological Nazi, but he was an opportunist. Hitler was rebuilding the German military, and ambitious officers like Choltitz saw opportunities for advancement. By 1939, when Germany invaded Poland, Choltitz was a major commanding a battalion. And this is where his reputation began. Not as a hero, but as a destroyer. During the invasion of the Netherlands in May 1940, Choltitz commanded the regiment that bombed Rotterdam. The historic city center was obliterated. Nearly 900 civilians died. Thousands more were left homeless. The destruction was so complete that the Dutch government surrendered the next day to prevent other cities from meeting the same fate. Choltitz later claimed he was following orders, that the bombing raid had been called off. But the message didn't reach the aircraft in time. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. But Rotterdam burned, and Choltitz received a promotion. In 1942, he was sent to the Eastern Front, the siege of Sebastopol in Crimea. Soviet forces held this fortress city for months. German commanders, frustrated by the resistance, ordered total destruction. Artillery pounded the city day and night. Choltitz's division was among those carrying out the bombardment. When Sebastopol finally fell, it was a ruin. Tens of thousands of Soviet soldiers and civilians dead. Historical buildings reduced to rubble. And once again, Choltitz was praised by his superiors for his efficiency. You see a pattern here. This was not a general troubled by destroying cities. This was a man who did what he was told, efficiently, ruthlessly, without apparent moral hesitation. By 1944, Dietrich von Choltitz was a lieutenant general, 50 years old, experienced, hardened by years of war, known for following orders no matter how harsh. In June 1944, he was commanding a corps in Normandy when the Allies invaded. His forces fought well, but were eventually pushed back by the overwhelming Allied advance. Choltitz himself was nearly killed when his headquarters was bombed, and then, in early August 1944, he received new orders. Adolf Hitler personally selected him for a critical assignment. He was to become military governor of Paris, the German garrison commander responsible for defending the city against the approaching Allies. Why did Hitler choose Choltitz? Because Paris was special, not just strategically, but symbolically. Paris was the jewel of occupied Europe, the city that proved German cultural and military superiority. Losing Paris would be a catastrophic blow to German morale. But Hitler didn't just want Paris defended. He wanted something else, something darker. On August 7, 1944, General Dietrich von Choltitz arrived in Paris to take command. He set up his headquarters in the Hotel Maurice, one of the most luxurious hotels in the city, overlooking the Tuileries Garden. He had approximately 20,000 German troops under his command, plus SS units, plus collaborationist French militia, a substantial force. But he also had a problem. The Allies were coming. American, British, and Free French forces were pushing inland from Normandy. Paris would be liberated soon. It was only a matter of time, and Choltitz had his orders from Hitler. Direct orders. Personal orders from the Führer himself. If Paris could not be held, it must be destroyed. Let me be very clear about what Adolf Hitler ordered. This wasn't vague. This wasn't implied. Hitler's command was explicit and detailed. Destroy the bridges across the Seine, every single one. Make the river impassable. Demolish the major monuments. The Eiffel Tower, Notre Dame, the Arc de Triomphe, Sacré-Cœur. Obliterate the symbols of French culture. Burn the museums. The Louvre with its priceless art. The treasures of Western civilization. Reduce them to ash. Level entire neighborhoods, historic districts, centuries-old architecture. Turn Paris into rubble. And this wasn't just vindictive rage. Though Hitler was certainly enraged, this was strategic. Paris in ruins would slow the Allied advance. The destruction would block roads. Rubble would create defensive positions. And psychologically, destroying Paris would devastate Allied and French morale. Hitler's reasoning was simple. If Germany couldn't have Paris, no one could. Engineers began preparing the demolitions. They placed explosives at key bridges. They rigged the Eiffel Tower. They prepared incendiary charges for museums and palaces. The plan was ready. All it needed was Choltitz's order to execute. But here's where the story gets complicated, because Choltitz later claimed he never intended to follow these orders. That from the moment he arrived in Paris, he was looking for ways to avoid destroying the city. Is that true? We'll examine the evidence. But first, let's understand what was happening in Paris in mid-August 1944. The city was in chaos. The French resistance, emboldened by Allied advances, was becoming bolder. Strikes broke out. Police refused to follow German orders. Barricades appeared in streets. On August 19, 1944, the Paris police went on strike. This was a major problem for the German garrison. The police had been maintaining order. Without them, the city could erupt. The same day, resistance fighters began seizing government buildings. The prefecture of police, City Hall. Important strategic points. Choltitz faced a decision. He could crush the uprising with overwhelming force. His troops outnumbered the poorly armed resistance fighters. He could restore order through violence, or he could allow the situation to develop. Let the resistance believe they were winning, while he prepared for either defense or destruction. What did he choose? Something in between. He ordered limited counterattacks. German troops recaptured some buildings, but not all. It was a strange, restrained response. Not the ruthless suppression you'd expect from the man who destroyed Rotterdam and Sebastopol. Why this restraint? Choltitz later claimed he was stalling, waiting for the right moment. But waiting for what? On August 20th, Swedish consul Roel Nordling approached Choltitz with a proposal. Nordling was acting as an intermediary between the Germans and the French resistance. He proposed a temporary truce. German forces would not attack resistance positions. In exchange, resistance fighters would not attack Germans. Choltitz agreed. This is stunning when you think about it. A Nazi general negotiating with resistance fighters, agreeing to a ceasefire with people his superiors considered terrorists. The truce lasted about 2 days. It broke down as both sides violated the terms. But those 2 days were critical. They bought time. Time for Allied forces to get closer. Time for the situation to evolve. And during this period, Choltitz did something else. He started stalling on Hitler's destruction orders. German high command kept sending him messages. Prepare the demolitions. Execute the Führer's orders. Destroy the bridges. Choltitz sent back reports. Preparations underway. Demolitions being finalized. Awaiting optimal moment for maximum effect. But he wasn't actually doing it. Or at least, he wasn't doing it completely. Some explosives were placed, but key bridges remained intact. The Eiffel Tower still stood. On August 23rd, Hitler personally called Choltitz. By this point, the Führer knew the Allies were close to Paris. He demanded to know the status of the demolitions. Choltitz gave vague answers. Technical difficulties. Waiting for the right moment. Soon, Hitler exploded. Is Paris burning? Is Paris burning? This phrase became famous. Hitler's fury, his demand for destruction, his obsession with ensuring that if Germany lost Paris, the city would burn, and Choltitz said yes. He told Hitler the preparations were complete, that Paris would burn, but he didn't give the order. Why not? This is the central mystery. Was it moral courage? Did Choltitz suddenly discover conscience after years of ruthless warfare? Or was it calculated pragmatism? Did he realize Germany was losing the war? That destroying Paris would make him a war criminal with no defense? That saving the city might save his own life? Or was it something else entirely? Did he simply lack the forces to both defend the city and carry out massive demolitions? Were the Allies arriving so fast that he had no practical way to execute the orders? The truth is probably all of these factors combined. But Choltitz, in his post-war memoir, would claim pure moral motivation. He saved Paris because it was the right thing to do. Historians are skeptical. August 24, 1944. Allied forces are approaching Paris. Free French armored divisions under General Philippe Leclerc are leading the advance. American forces are close behind inside Paris. The situation is reaching a breaking point. Resistance fighters control parts of the city, but German forces still hold key positions. And Choltitz still has the power to cause massive destruction. That evening, Raoul Nordling, the Swedish consul, made another approach to Choltitz. He brought a message from the resistance. If Choltitz ordered his troops to withdraw peacefully, if he left Paris intact, he would be treated as a prisoner of war, not a war criminal. Think about what this offer meant. Choltitz could survive, not just survive, but potentially avoid prosecution for his actions in Rotterdam, Sebastopol, and elsewhere. All he had to do was nothing. Don't blow up the city. Don't fight to the last man. Just let it go. For a man who'd spent weeks stalling and making excuses to his superiors, this offer must have seemed like salvation. But Choltitz later claimed he didn't need the offer, that he'd already decided to disobey Hitler, that his conscience had spoken again. Historians are skeptical, but let's continue the story. August 25, 1944, dawn. French armor enters Paris. The first units roll down the streets to scenes of jubilation. Parisians pour into the streets. They've been waiting for years for this moment. German forces in some areas fight brief skirmishes, but there's no coordinated defense, no massive last stand. It's almost as if Choltitz has told his commanders, do what you must to survive, but don't die for a lost cause. By mid-morning, French troops have reached the city center. They're approaching German headquarters. The Hotel Morris, where Choltitz is still in command. At 2:30 p.m., French officers enter the hotel. They find Choltitz in his office, calmly sitting at his desk, not frantically destroying documents, not preparing a suicide like other Nazi commanders had done in similar situations, just waiting. He surrenders without resistance. Lieutenant Henry Karcher of the Free French Forces takes Choltitz's formal surrender. The German garrison commander is now prisoner of war, and Paris is intact. The bridges stand. The Eiffel Tower gleams in the August sun. Notre Dame's bells ring for the first time in 4 years. The Louvre's treasures are safe. The city that Hitler ordered destroyed survives. That evening, General Charles de Gaulle enters Paris in triumph. He gives a famous speech from the Hôtel de Ville. Paris outraged, Paris broken, Paris martyred, but Paris liberated, and already a narrative is forming. A story about how Paris was saved. A story that will be told and retold for decades. But here's what's interesting. In de Gaulle's speech, in the initial celebrations, Choltitz barely gets mentioned. The credit goes to the French resistance, to the police who went on strike, to the resistance fighters who seized buildings and held them against the Germans, to the civilians who built barricades, and to a large extent, they deserve that credit. Without their uprising, without their courage, the situation might have been very different. But Choltitz, he's just another captured German general, one of thousands by this point in the war. His transformation into the savior of Paris would come later, much later, and largely through his own efforts. Let's talk about what actually happened in those final days, and whether Choltitz really deserves the hero's mantle he later claimed. First, the demolitions. Were they really ready to go? Could Choltitz have destroyed Paris with a single order? Post-war investigations revealed that while explosives had been placed at some bridges, the demolition preparations were incomplete. Many key bridges had no explosives at all. The Eiffel Tower had been rigged, but the charges were insufficient to bring it down completely. Why? Likely because Choltitz's engineers were stalling. They were skilled military men who could see the war was lost. They weren't eager to be known as the people who destroyed Paris. Second, did Choltitz really plan to destroy the city? Or was he always looking for an excuse not to? His communications with Berlin show him constantly making excuses, delays, technical problems, need more time. This suggests he was reluctant from the start, but is reluctance the same as moral courage? Or was he just covering his bases, telling Berlin what they wanted to hear while avoiding actual commitment? Third, did he actually save Paris? Or did the rapid Allied advance and the resistance uprising make destruction impossible anyway? By August 25th, Allied forces were in the city. Resistance fighters held key positions. Even if Choltitz had ordered demolitions, could his fragmented, demoralized forces have carried them out? Maybe not. Maybe Paris was saved by circumstances, and Choltitz simply avoided making a bad situation worse. These are uncomfortable questions, because we want the story to be simple. We want the German general who defied Hitler, the Nazi with a conscience, the man who chose what was right over what was ordered. But history is rarely that clean. After the liberation of Paris, Dietrich von Choltitz became a prisoner of war. He was held by the French, then transferred to British custody, eventually to a POW camp in England. He spent the remaining months of the war in captivity, while Germany collapsed, while Hitler committed suicide, while the full horrors of Nazi atrocities became known to the world. And during this time, Choltitz did a lot of thinking about his future, about his legacy, about how history would remember him. He realized something important. Most German generals were going to be remembered as war criminals or as defeated enemies. Their careers, their names, would be forever tainted by association with the Nazi regime. But he had something different. He had Paris in 1949, 4 years after the war ended. Choltitz wrote a memoir, Soldat unter Soldaten, Soldier Among Soldiers. In this book, he presented his version of events, And it was a very specific narrative. He was the German general who saved Paris, who defied Hitler's direct orders, who chose humanity over obedience, who preserved Western civilization's greatest city. He described agonizing moral debates, sleepless nights wrestling with his conscience. The moment he decided he would not destroy such beauty, he portrayed himself as a cultured man, a lover of art and history, a professional soldier who found himself serving an evil regime but retained his moral compass, and he positioned his refusal to destroy Paris as the defining act of his life, the moment that set him apart from other Nazi commanders. It was a compelling narrative, redemptive, appealing, and it was exactly what post-war audiences wanted to hear. You see, by the late 1940s and 1950s, the world was dealing with complex feelings about World War II. Yes, the Nazis were evil, but not every German soldier could have been a monster. Surely some were just following orders. Surely some retained their humanity. Choltitz's story fit perfectly into this need. He was the good German, the man who proved that even in the Nazi military, individuals could make moral choices. His memoir became popular. It was translated into multiple languages. Choltitz gave interviews. He appeared at conferences about the war. He cultivated his image as Paris's savior. And then in 1966, something happened that cemented the myth forever. A book called Is Paris Burning? By Larry Collins and Dominique Lapierre. This book, based partly on Choltitz's own account, told the dramatic story of Paris's liberation, with Choltitz as a central heroic figure, the noble general defying the mad dictator, the man of conscience in an evil regime. The book was a massive bestseller. It was adapted into a major Hollywood film in 1966 starring a who's who of acting talent. Gert Verb played Choltitz as a sympathetic, conflicted hero. Millions of people around the world absorbed this version of events, and it became the accepted narrative. Dietrich von Choltitz saved Paris, period. End of story. But even during his lifetime, French resistance veterans were objecting. They pointed out that they had been fighting for Paris's liberation, that their uprising had tied down German forces, that their actions had made destruction difficult. They resented this German general getting credit for what French men and women had. Accomplished historians began looking more carefully at the documentary evidence, orders, reports, communications between Choltitz and Berlin. What they found was more ambiguous. Yes, Choltitz stalled. Yes, he didn't carry out full demolitions. But whether this was moral courage or pragmatic survival instinct, the evidence didn't clearly show. Some historians went further. They pointed out Choltitz's record in Rotterdam and Sebastopol, cities he had helped destroy without apparent hesitation. Was it credible that this same man suddenly grew a conscience in Paris? Or was Paris simply different because by August 1944, Germany was obviously losing? Because destroying Paris would accomplish nothing except making Choltitz a certain war criminal. Because he wanted to survive? The debate continues to this day. Choltitz himself never wavered from his story. He insisted until his death in 1966 that he had saved Paris through moral choice, that he had looked at the city's beauty and could not bring himself to destroy it. Maybe that's true. Maybe he genuinely did have a moral awakening in those final days of occupation. Or maybe he was a skilled survivor who recognized that his best chance at avoiding prosecution and living peacefully after the war was to position himself as the man who saved Paris. We'll never know what was truly in his heart. Dietrich von Choltitz died on November 5, 1966, in Baden-Baden, Germany. He was 71 years old. He lived comfortably in post-war Germany, a retired general with a comfortable pension, a man known for saving Paris. His obituaries were respectful. Some even called him heroic. The narrative he had crafted held firm, but in the years since his death, historians have continued to examine his story. And the picture has become more complex. Recent research has revealed more about his actions in Rotterdam and Sebastopol, the destruction he participated in, the orders he followed without question. This makes his claimed moral transformation in Paris harder to accept at face value. Documents from German archives show that Choltitz was under enormous pressure from Berlin, but they also show he was giving excuses and stalling from early in his tenure as Paris commander. This suggests he never fully intended to carry out the demolitions. But does that prove moral courage, or just self-preservation? French historians have been particularly critical. Many argue that the French resistance played the crucial role in Paris's salvation, that Choltitz simply capitulated when he realized defense was hopeless. They point out that giving Choltitz credit diminishes the bravery of resistance fighters, the men and women who risked their lives, who fought with inadequate weapons against a professional army, who held out until Allied forces arrived. The truth, as often happens in history, is probably somewhere in the middle. Paris was saved by multiple factors: the rapid Allied advance, the resistance uprising that divided German forces, the demoralization of German troops who knew the war was lost, and yes, Choltitz's decision not to order demolitions even when he technically still could have. Was he a hero? That depends on your definition. He didn't destroy a city he could have destroyed. That's worth something. But he also destroyed other cities without hesitation when the war was still going Germany's way. That's worth remembering too. He made a choice in Paris that saved irreplaceable cultural treasures and countless lives. That deserves acknowledgement. But he made that choice when Germany was clearly losing, and destruction would only have made him a certain war criminal. That context matters. The story of Dietrich von Choltitz is a reminder that history is complicated, that people are complicated, that the line between hero and villain is often blurrier than we'd like. He was neither the pure hero of his memoir, nor a simple villain like other Nazi commanders. He was a professional soldier who adapted to circumstances, who followed orders when it was advantageous, and broke them when it served his interests. Does that make him good or bad, human or monstrous? Perhaps the most important lesson from Choltitz's story is this: individual choices matter, even in the darkest circumstances. Even when following evil orders seems inevitable, individuals still have agency, still make choices. Choltitz chose not to destroy Paris, whatever his reasons, and Paris stands today because of that choice. Thousands of other German officers made different choices, followed orders to the bitter end, destroyed cities, killed civilians, claimed afterward they had no choice. Choltitz proves they did have a choice. He made one, whether his motivation was conscience or calculation, whether he deserves the title of hero or merely pragmatist. We can debate forever. What we cannot debate is that Paris survived, and that beautiful, irreplaceable city still welcomes millions of visitors every year, to walk streets that nearly became rubble, to see monuments that nearly became dust. That legacy, whatever Choltitz's true motivations, is worth preserving. General Dietrich von Choltitz died believing he was Paris's savior. History remembers him as, well, it's complicated. He was a Nazi general who destroyed some cities and saved another. A man who followed brutal orders for years and disobeyed them once when it mattered most. A destroyer who became, through circumstances or conscience, a preserver. Was he the hero of Paris? Or did he simply not make things worse? Did he save the city? Or did the city save itself while he got out of the way? These questions remain debated, and that debate is healthy. It reminds us to question simple narratives, to look deeper into the motives behind heroic stories, to remember that history is written by survivors who often have reasons to present themselves in the best light. If this story of moral complexity, heroic myth-making, and the fine line between following and breaking orders moved you, hit that like button and subscribe. Leave a comment. Was Choltitz a hero who saved Paris? or an opportunist who took credit for what resistance fighters accomplished, because the most important stories are the ones that refuse to give us easy answers, the ones that make us think, question. And remember that in war, as in life, people are never as simple as we want them to be. Thanks for watching. What we do know is that Paris survived, and that Choltitz, through skill or luck or conscience or calculation, did not order its destruction. Whether that makes him a hero is a question each person must answer for themselves.